you aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. You must be a witch.
Happy Samhain! It's your Auntie Amy, and your Auntie Risa is here too.
Yeah, happy Halloween, happy Samhain, happy tipping into the darkness, happy walking on the edge of death. We're just happy to be with you. And we're on Zoom today so we can actually see the beautiful faces of our guests. So Amy and I are grinning ridiculously happy.
Yes, without further ado, we're joined today by Loretta, the Death Witch, and Angela, the Death Doula. So maybe from that you can infer today's theme. So I'll let you introduce yourselves. Why don't we start with you, Loretta? Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am Loretta. I often go by Lou. I work closely with my ancestors. Ancestor veneration is a key focus of my practice. I also work with Santa Muerte. And I am a house witch at Ritualcraft. I co-run Ritualcraft School. And I founded Mile High Conjure Gala to elevate the work of my elders.
Amazing. So we'll get into Ritualcraft and Mile High Conjure Gala and all that as we get into it. Angela, who are you?
Hi, I'm Angela. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I am many things, but one of the things that I am currently focusing on and feel has changed my life in so many ways is the calling of becoming a death midwife or a death doula. You can also call it end-of-life planner. But I came to this calling actually from working with my ancestors through various long meditations. It's just something I feel really passionate about, and I feel like nervous all of a sudden talking about it.
Because a lot of it is very personal too, right? So it can sometimes be hard to figure out a way to be public about these things.
Yeah, totally. I'm a practicing witch. That also feels like something that has been like buried deep in my mind that has like been coming forth over the past, few years. So yeah, that's how I'll introduce myself, I guess.
So my overarching and very big question that I want to start with, and whoever responds most quickly, I guess, can start. Why death?
I mean, for me, I experienced death really closely at a really young age. My sister was killed when she was 21 and I was 12. It was a very, very public event. And it was like an event that took place very, very close to our home. And it was literally on like national news. So my family was always very spiritual, but not necessarily religious. So when Anita died, we were able to come together really closely as a family. But because it was so public, it wasn't, and at 12, I wasn't necessarily equipped, I think, to deal with everyone watching us in that grieving process. So I learned how to, what I later realized was to call in different ways to be hidden so that I could process grief and everything that was going on around me. And then when I was 18, my father passed away. And then, several different, I had a cousin who committed suicide a couple of years after my sister was killed. And I grew up in Denver at a time that the Denver I grew up in was very different from the Denver that people know now. It was, pre-gentrification, and it was a bit of a rougher place to live in. So I had seen people be killed in front of me. And so through all those experiences and losing loved ones, I realized that there was a deeper calling there, and that the only way I was going to maintain sanity and reach some sort of emotional maturity was to dive deep into the shadow and deep into the dark and find resilience and find light in the dark.
We're all just sort of furiously nodding our heads. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta. Yeah. I guess for me, in regards to why death, it's something I've always been very aware of. My mom lost both her parents when she was really young, when she was 10 and 12. Mm-hmm. And I myself was a premature baby. So I was always being told, like, you were so close to death. We had to be prepared for your death when you were first born. And then as I aged and like asking my mom, like, I never asked like, where are our grandparents? But I just knew that her parents had died. And the more questions I asked, I never got answers from her. I think, but looking back now, I think it was too hard for her to talk about being so young. And she wasn't able to answer the questions that I had as a kid about even just like general questions, like, obviously she knows when their birthdays are and everything, but general questions of like, well, what was their favorite food? Like my mom had no ability to answer those. And maybe because she just kind of blocked it out, understandably. So as I aged, I found myself always being the one to like be with family. Like, when my Uncle Tommy was passing, when he was dying in the hospital, like I was the one with my dad going like often, like just being that support and that rock for people. And there wasn't any one clear moment for me where it was like, I'm going to go into like the death, I don't want to call it an industry, but it is that in a sense. It was more, I felt comfortable with death, comfortable sitting in that uncomfortable feeling of the unknown. Loretta, to kind of mirror back what you were saying, it is about finding a light in the dark. And I think there's people who are that light for others in that time. Yeah, I think that's about it. That sums it up for me. It's just something I've always been aware of and felt comfortable with. And it's interesting because over the past, so the past year I did my training for becoming like an official death doula. I put quotes because there's really no official like certification for it. Like there's no guidelines like this makes you a death doula. Like you're just kind of, it's such a new field that it's kind of like, well, here you go, you're in it. It's funny, I a lot of like dead, like animals that are dying have been coming to me recently, like the past like few months. So I feel grateful for the past and what I experienced, because now like these little animals, like a squirrel, a possum or whatever, are coming into my yard, and I'm like, okay, I will sit with you. I will be here for your passing, and I will bury you in the backyard with Lewis, my dog, and the other possum that died like a month ago. It's funny how it shows up, and it is not something to, in my opinion, it's not something to fear.
No, it's almost as if these animals can sense that you've created this like safe vibe around yourself where they can come. And because I was just thinking about like my my grandfather died when I was pretty young, and my grandmother, like, she was alive after my grandfather died. Again, I'm using square quotes, but like she basically just was not a person anymore. But I remember his funeral, and I was sitting with her and I was holding her hand, and everyone was coming up and doing their sort of like, oh, I'm so sorry, and then running away, and oh, I'm so sorry, and running away. And she kind of squeezed my hand and she was like, you know, I'm glad you're sitting with me because everyone else just runs away. And, you know, that really stuck with me. So, you know, I've had friends whose parents have died way too young. And I always wanted to make sure to be the person at the funeral or on the phone or whatever that's not afraid to talk to the person who's grieving. I think a lot of times you hear like, well, I just didn't call him because I didn't know what to say. And so that's like part of what I want to talk about here is like, we don't talk about it, even though it's inevitable for literally like every living thing, you know, death, but we don't have the tools and we don't talk about it and we're scared to talk about it. And my mother, when I'm trying to like be proactive about, you know, making plans, she said, well, I'm never going to die. And it's like, okay, fine. But like, can we please talk about this for real, you know? So like, let's start with Loretta. Like, what are some of the best tools that you have found for dealing or helping other people deal?
You know, when it's a common thing that comes into the shop, you know, questions around death and how to venerate ancestors or venerate the newly dead. And I find that a lot of people that come in seeking are people that are experiencing a large trauma around someone who has passed. So an unnatural death, so to speak, you know, a suicide or an accident, you know, not someone who's dying of old age. As very simple as it sounds, I think the most common advice that I give people is to just talk to the person, which it sounds so funny, but it's like,
truth. They're still there.
Yeah, exactly. They're still there. You know, there's no way you can be more close to somebody than through the vibration of communication. So if we can outwardly speak to the dead, if we can outwardly speak to our loved ones, to our friends and family and our pets, and they hear us, and people will often be a little like, you know, is that weird? I mean, no, it's not weird unless, you know, you feel weird about it, but then think about why you feel weird about it. You know, if someone is truly uncomfortable, then, you know, there's a whole list of different plants that we can work with to be conduits for comfort in communication with the dead. You know, there's all sorts of different rituals that we can do around communication with the dead. But I find that if we strip the complication around communication and just get right to the point, it's the most helpful. And it's probably when you get the most direct answers as well.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Angela? What's your like number one tool that you've learned in the past year while you've been training?
In regards to grief?
Or whatever you think is important, yeah.
I think what's brought me the most peace and what's brought me the most, I guess, peace of mind in a sense is thinking of my own death and like the mundane aspects, right? What do I want? Do I get grossed out if I picture my body getting cremated? Like, oh, I don't want to get burned, right? So maybe I want to opt for like, you know, a green burial is something, let's say. Like for me, one of the first things we started in my training, and I trained with Alua Arthur, who runs Going with Grace doula services and also training. One of the first things we looked at was like, what would we want for ourselves? And I think that kind of opened like this door of this library that has all these books that, you know, you could like kind of start peeking in. So for me, I feel like I could die tomorrow and be happy, knowing that like I've done mundane things, like I have a will, I have an advance directive, I have, you know, all the paperwork that is expected. I mean, maybe I'd like to say in a week, because I still haven't found the whole living burial, you know, plot that I want to be at. But
there's a couple things you wouldn't mind doing first,
yeah.
right?
But I'm saying that, you know, having that relationship with death and your own death, because you are going to die. And the thing is, we don't know when it's going to happen. We have no fucking clue, right? Mm. And so for me, having the mundane aspects, and then the other part that I so solidly feel, like in my heart, in my fucking bones, is that we will, like, our ancestors are with us. They will greet us. They will be there. They will extend their hand and be like, you know, come, it's time. You know, one of my great fears, I'm going to be vulnerable for a moment, is dying a violent death. That is, I fucking check our doors all the time, like at night, to make sure they're locked. You know, if the cat's outside the window, I'm like, what? You know, wake up, and it's not a person? Okay, good. And after looking at my own death and thinking it could happen in any amount of ways, it could happen at any time, that thought of my ancestors being there to receive me, or my guides, or my angels, whoever, even if it was violent, that still brought me peace, that peace of mind, that like I am going to be taken care of and received with love no matter what.
And that's a ritual too, right? Like finding that peace of belief that you can hold on to and give it to yourself. It kind of almost doesn't, I mean, on our plane, in our reality, it doesn't really matter whether you're right or not, you know, that giving ourselves that piece of the story is kind of what we do all the time to get ourselves through. I think you're so right. I was thinking about sort of highlighting that difference too between, you know, the kind of larger fear of death and old age, and then this pressing in fear of violence. And we live in a time now of pandemic. We're in a global plague. Like death is pressing in ways it never has before in our lifetime. Mm. Is that something that you feel you carry more heavily because of your ancestor work, Loretta?
It's interesting how it's come up more recently, this last maybe 6 or so months, really. I was in a lesson with one of my elders, Professor Porterfield, and my screen was like glitching out and doing a bunch of weird stuff. And he asked me if things like that had been happening a lot lately. And I said, yeah, you know, things have been very thick lately. And he said, yeah, I mean, that's because there are several thousand new people transitioning. Some are the unsettled dead. Some are, you know, the dead who were ready to transition. And then, you know, with this huge influx of death, it also unsettles the already settled dead. But not only, you know, the physical deaths that have been occurring over the last 6 or so months, there's, you know, this greater death that I think that we're all kind of in the middle of right now. And, you know, death of systems, death of hiding. There is, I think death is more violence, real violence, and real death is more accessible for people to witness. now. And every time we witness a death, especially a violent death, it creates another spirit, and then every time we watch that, it feeds into that spirit. And there's all these spirits around all of these things that are happening in the world right now and in this country that we're bearing witness to and we're feeding the spirit of. And in that feeding, there are systems that are in their death rattle. There are hidden beliefs that are being unearthed. So I think all of those things happening at the same time, along with the global pandemic, along with people that, pass every day, it's all very heightened, especially, I think it's heightened for everybody. I think that not everybody really understands what they're feeling, but for people that walk with the dead regularly in an aware place, I think it's been a little extra.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
You said among the deaths that we're experiencing now, there's the death of hiding.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that? About the ways that we're kind of dying while we're alive, the shedding?
So I think for so everything that we're experiencing right now is nothing new, right? We've done this before as humans. But I think that, starting sometime in the not so distant past, we were able to have our beliefs a bit more hidden. I think that there were certain things that we would uncomfortably laugh about around, the dinner table at holidays. If an uncle or a cousin or somebody said something off. I think that there were things that were at one time considered to be acceptable again, even though we are, we see this narrative of, oh, well, now, our current administration has made all of these things acceptable. Well, they've always been acceptable. We've just hid them. We've brushed them under the rug. So I think that those systems that we ourselves have created of hiding are dying. I think that it's also exposes parts of us that we have been able to hide, either because we know that it doesn't feel comfortable, or we know that it's not even a belief that is actually ours, a belief that we've inherited. But all of those things are being unearthed, and, we will either face them and we will do the work to change them, and we will do the work to heal ourselves and heal any damage we may have caused accidentally. Not accidentally. I shouldn't say accidentally. Any harm that we've caused while we were being willfully ignorant. None of that can be hidden anymore. So we'll either accept that this shedding is happening, and we will either do the work around it, or we will die with it.
I've heard a lot of people say, it seems like it's getting worse, and then the sort of counter argument to that is that things need to be exposed before they die, or like a bug's crawling out of the woodwork before they perish. It's that same kind of thing. And I think that there are pros and cons everywhere. We as witches, we sort of see a light and dark in every single thing. And I think that that's the same with this heightened awareness that we have. Obviously, it's good because we're educating ourselves about the reality. And, if there weren't videotapes, maybe we wouldn't get the modicum of justice that maybe we will get. But at the same time, are we being desensitized? Mm-hmm. Like you're saying, it's almost like we're at this crossroad where it's like either we'll take this uncovering and we'll go, or we'll just shrug.
Yeah. it's an interesting thing being a woman of color who, like, I've experienced these things my whole life. You know, I have never, ever, ever, ever been comfortable in certain situations. You know, I've never been the person that is like, felt completely confident when I'm getting pulled over. Like, that's never been my experience. So it's interesting to hear people who are so shocked about these things. I'm like, really? Like, really, y'all? Like, I wish I knew what that was like, because that's just a gift I've never experienced.
Yeah, that's the ignorance is bliss. That's where that comes from, right? The blissful ignorance of not being afraid.
Yeah. So hopefully, I do think that there is a place where we cross the line of bearing witness to when we, step into the realm of, like, for lack of a more tasteful term, like murder porn, that we don't really need to expose ourselves to. But my hope is that before crossing that line, we can realize that we all have something in common with the person that we're watching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those images, like you say, they're so powerful. Like, it's so accurate that I have that feeling so accurately that you described, that when you watch a death, there is that person's spirit, and then there's this spirit of what you just experienced. There is this darkness, and it's getting passed around and accelerated and numb, or like deadened, like trauma deadened from seeing it over and over again. Like, describes, I think, what most people I know of color are feeling to a greater degree than myself. But there is this sort of nasty seething spirit, and we have to be better and stronger than it. We have to. I think.
Because, normalization is fucking real. And that's, we see, like, things that would have been totally out of the question, or the American president is a great example. Like, he says so many crazy things and has been doing for so long that at this point, he says something crazy and we're like, well, there's crazy again being crazy. And we just kind of, again, like I say, we just kind of shrug because we're used to it. This is normal now. So how do we, like, denormalize, like, and I guess,
or how do we like death doula that whole culture? Angela, how do we do it?
I don't know. Honestly, in the death doula community right now, there's a conversation, right? So, like, something that death doulas say often is, like, everyone deserves a good death, which is true, right? What is a good death to you? And that is a personal question for anyone to answer. But there are communities, BIPOC, Indigenous communities, who the idea of a good death is, like, it's not known. And that feels like this conversation is going around the communities, and, like, how do we as doulas who believe deeply in a good death for everyone, how do we help? Or how, I don't know if help's the word. It's hard for me to talk about it because I'm still unraveling it in my own mind of how can I be part of this world and make sure that everyone does have a good death. I can do it from the animals that come to my backyard. I can do it from the clients I work with. I can do it by reminding anyone who's hearing this, like, everyone deserves a good death on their own terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. It's open-ended right now. And, part of the work that I would, I use the word death normalization in the sense that to think about your own death and to normalize thinking about it, talking about it with family members, talking about it with your children even, like, but it's so interesting, Amy, to hear you just say now death normalization and compare it to, the traumatic videos that are being passed around. That makes, that was kind of shocking. I was like, oh, wait, no, this term death normalization is, in my mind, it's been one way, but you're right. It can be flipped.
Yeah.
Something entirely, terrible.
Yeah, like we have to refuse to be desensitized, I think is the thing. Like no matter how many videos show up on your feed, like you have to be sensitive to each and every fucking one. And
or call people out who are posting them and be like, why the fuck are you posting this? This is traumatic.
Yes.
Don't do this. This hurts people.
Yeah.
Not only the family who's involved in the person who's dying in a fucking video, like call them out.
Yeah. I think about a month ago, we went to, my fiance and I went to New Mexico to visit a family down there. And the hotel casino that we stayed in had just reopened. And I had thought that it was just reopening from just being shut down for COVID. So we went to go visit my cousin, and he was like, "Oh, you're staying there." Well, that was like it just reopened because it was like they turned it into kind of like a makeshift hospital for all of the indigenous people, and it just hit me, like not everyone. Not only are people in this country not allowed to live in equality, there are people in this country who are not even allowed to die or be sick with equality.
Yeah.
So I think every community needs a death doula.
Yes. I just read, I should have wrote it down. One of the Facebook communities that I'm involved in Death Doula, they had a mentorship for in the indigenous community. I don't know where. I wish I could remember. Bringing teens on to be trained. Start like a process of talking about death midwifery. Mm-hmm. And like that's the fucking thing is like we all know how to help our families die, right? Yeah. So like, and we have forgotten, like. We literally put millions of tons of concrete into the earth for like a casket burial. For each casket that goes in, it's like however many hundreds or thousands of pounds of concrete, steel, wood, all that stuff into the earth. But like there's other options. First off, 200, 300 years ago, it was home funerals. It was home burials. You were able to bury your people, your family on land. Mm-hmm. If you're privileged enough to have land, and that's, I know that I'm meant to do this work for many reasons, but one of them is helping people remember how to die and how to die well. Like the washing of a body, instinctively how to do it because your ancestors have been washing your ancestors' bodies for thousands of years. Thousands of years, as long as we've been fucking alive. I'm sorry if I'm cursing too much, y'all. I'm amped.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the body washing because most of our listeners know my father died in my house. So I need to be right. Yeah, I need to be right with death. Like, and again, our listeners, I think, also know this, and my dear friends know this, that the last thing he said to me was kényelmes, which is the Hungarian word for comfortable. Mm. And the last thing I said to him was szeretlek, which is I love you. And that was not always the case. Like, there were probably more nights when I screamed him to sleep than my last words being I love you. But, in the morning I came down, he was gone. I called the ambulance. That's like the memory of the death that was most traumatic for me. I would like relive that 9/11 call multiple times a day for like months. That was the scariest part for some reason, not like losing him, but like having to make the official call. Anyway, but to get back to what you were saying, we're in the hospital and they make us wait and we were in this room and I looked at my husband. I was like, he's dead. This is the death room. This is the death room. There was like a sort of like a secular faith, everything's going to be okay kind of shitty poster in there, and like a box of Kleenex. And then, we just sat there, and I looked at my husband. I said, this is the death room. For sure, he's gone. They did not save him. He's gone. This is the death room. And I said it about 20 times. This is the death room. This is the death room. This is the death room. And then they finally let me see his body. And Angela, this is what made me think of it. And I went over to the sink, and I took some paper towels, and I wet the paper towels, and I just started wiping his feet.
Yeah. Yes, the soles of the feet are a way for the spirit to leave the body, so it makes sense.
And I didn't know that. Like, I, of course, remember the stories of Jesus of Nazareth, and, like Mary Magdalene and the feet washing. Oh, well, yeah. And this wasn't something that anyone in my family had ever talked about. When someone dies, you wash their feet. Like, that wasn't a conversation that any of us had. And I sort of woke up in the middle of this practice. And I almost asked myself, why am I doing this? What am I doing? But not in a shitty way, but
I relate to that so much. I held my grandmother's feet the day before she died and my grandfather's feet the day before he died, 10 years apart. I don't know why. I rubbed and massaged their I've never touched their feet before in their lives. Why did I want to touch them that day?
And again, I think, this is something that's coming up in the race relations, for lack of a better word. I saw somebody posted something about people washing Black people's feet, and somebody was like, oh, you're the this and that, and I was like you want to punish yourself or proselytize or wear a hair shirt and whip yourself. And I was like, that's not what I see here. What I see here is a humbling of yourself and an honoring of another person. I honor you and your humanity, and I am no better than you. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's not it's like flagellation. It's honoring someone.
Absolutely. Amy, too, I want to just back up for a moment, and I want to put out there to the listeners and to anyone, in each state and in each, I don't know, do you guys call it counties in your area? Is it states as well in Canada? What's
provinces?
Province. Okay. I'm assuming it's the same. There's a Hospice Association of Canada, Hospice Association Canada, which is a great resource for death doula stuff. But side note, you can have if someone dies in your house, a family member, you can have them in there for an extended period of time. Not you might
I'm sorry, I just for our listeners who didn't see me shudder just there, I was I had a physical reaction to that. But yeah, I mean that's how it was done. Yeah.
What I'm saying is, in the case of home funerals, let's say, or home wakes, or grandfather is in the bed, grandfather dies. And this is where death doulas, death midwives can come in and say, hey, I know that I know the rules, the laws for this area. You can take your time once he passes. You can wash his feet. You can wash his face. You can wrap him in a shroud. There's no rush. And that's the thing, because, look, our hospitals are great resources. They do wonderful things. Doctors work hard, all the stuff. I'm saying this with the utmost kindness. They're still an institution. So they're get him in, get him out. Right?
Oh, they were literally pushing me out. Okay, time's up. Let's go. Yeah.
And it doesn't have, this is why I'm talking about this work, and why I want to talk to anyone who will listen. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be different. You get to, if you take the time to look at your own death and what you would want. For me, yes, come to my house and let's have a wake. I have already made the playlist. Put it on repeat, but it doesn't have to be that. And you get to write this down for your family members. You get to tell them, children, here's what I would want for my body. Here is what I would want, for me, I plan on embroidering my own death shroud. And I don't know when I'm going to start on it, but I know it's something I want to do. It can be this deep ritual. And if the person who is dying or who has died has told you their wishes, I mean, great. Honor that. Then then you have no questions. You don't have to worry about what suit you're going to pick out. If they want a suit, they would have picked it out already. What I'm saying is, take the time to think about it for yourself, and take the time to tell your family members, write it down, make documents, tell them where the documents are, the mundane aspect, right? And then sprinkle that magic in by like creating a playlist, or like, I'm going to have champagne and cake at my funeral. Like, please come.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I'm definitely going to make the mixtape. I don't trust none of y'all motherfuckers to do music, right? I make my own playlist. But I want to tell our listeners that I did one of your exercises, Angela. You held this, like...
Virtual living funeral cinema.
And I don't want to say too much about it, because I really found that, like, not knowing what to expect made the experience better for me. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a planner, and I didn't want anything. I didn't know. So I'm glad in retrospect that I couldn't have planned anything. But I will say there was this one thing where we had to sort of like write down some last words. And I'm cool with death. I'm whatever. I'm cool with my own death, and I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing, and then we all finished, and then we read them out loud to each other. And only when I started reading it out loud did I start to choke up a bit and start to well up a bit. And I was just thinking about that when, Loretta, you were talking about talking and how, like, we can think our thoughts and prayers, but like saying things out loud is a completely different experience, like for our bodies, for our environments. Yeah. So, yeah, I would recommend this virtual living funeral, whether you do it through Angela or whether you just like think about it on your own terms and just start to think about like your playlist or your last words or things to make your own death good.
Yes. Yes. And it doesn't have to be an expensive thing either. It can be very, I don't want to say affordable, but, the funeral.
Dude, my father put in his will that he wanted the least expensive, like, legal method of disposal. He was like, I don't want you spending any money. And to relieve me of the guilt, he actually put it in writing. So that's another good thing too. Like, I think a lot of the industry that you're talking about makes his money from people trying to spend their way out of guilty feelings, right?
Like,
if I could get them
they don't need to be embalmed, like that came about because of the Civil War. Embalming became a thing because of the Civil War, because they were shipping, the body from, I don't know, Louisiana to New York or something. So they had to figure out a way to keep it from decomposing. It is unnecessary unless the person who is dying wants that, right? Mm. But ideally it's unnecessary. And then, just side note, and I already said this before, but check out green burials, because that is becoming more and more the way that, at least the way I want to choose to go. And that's where they literally put you in the ground, and you can get buried if you want in like a basket casket. They're beautiful.
Basket casket. You can weave it yourself.
Yes.
Loretta, what do you think happens when you die?
Well, from what I have seen and experienced myself with being visited by the people that I know that have died, I know for certain, without question, as a matter of fact, that there is a spirit. I've seen it, talked to spirits, and there's no question. Interestingly, after my sister was killed, my father and I made a deal that whichever one of us died first, we would visit the other and kind of fill the other in on what happened. So I do have some insider information. From what I was told by my father, you get a kind of interesting play-by-play, not from your perspective, but from the millions of perspectives of the people observing you and experiencing you. And in that play-by-play are all the thoughts and feelings and emotions that other people have experienced with you or as a result of you. And you can look at that as either being scary or educational. It's up to you. And then I was told that from there, you are greeted by your closest ancestors. And then from down the line, you are greeted by and kind of do the, hey, how's it going type of thing with ancestors you may have never known. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you decide whether or not your work is done in this realm. And if it is, you can decide whether you want to come back and revisit this realm as a different being, or you'd like to stay in spirit form. That's what my dad told me a couple weeks after he died.
Are you working on a book? Because I need the book version of this. Like, I feel like I asked this like philosophical question and got like a very like, like the answer, not like, oh, you know, but like, no, here's what, like, I genuinely feel like I 100% believe you. So, I mean, I would ask you too, Angela, but like Loretta kind of already answered.
Also, I feel like, I mean, I don't know, I have no idea. But
now I want to know, which one do you choose, do you think, Loretta? Like for you, or do you have it? Do you have your plan? Do you know what you'll choose?
You're going to write it in your will?
I do.
I'm coming back.
It depends on what age I am at the time of my death. If I were to die tonight, I would choose to come back and guide my family through different times until they no longer needed me. I also have a student that I have dedicated to, and I would, return and just as spirit to help her through my transition. And then at the point when no one needed me anymore, I would choose to come back and re-experience this realm as a human again, because I know that we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I think me too. I have had this as like a thought experiment my whole life of exactly this question. If when I die, I was given the choice to move on or come back. I think I read Jonathan Livingston Seagull or something, and I was young and always pictured that moment, But until I had a kid, I was always very convinced that I would just be happy and done, and I felt very just happy and enjoying this realm while I was here, and then I was on to the next one. And now I'm terrified of death. Never was before. Fucking terrified. Not of my own death, only of hers.
Yeah. I think you're talking about your daughter.
Missing her.
Just for our listeners who don't know who her is. Yeah.
Oh,
I think becoming a parent is definitely like a different whole different notion of death and what that means. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things like you've already described that are going to push awareness of death on you, but that was it for me.
I was a preschool teacher for 7 years, and currently I'm a nanny. And one of my kiddos, they knew all the stories about my dog, right? Because I would talk frequently about my dog. And then my dog died last year, and I had to go to school and tell them, hey guys, you're probably not going to hear too many more stories about him of, current happenings of what he's doing because he died. I didn't say it like that. It was much more. It was much more.
What's up?
No more dog stories. Dog died. No more stories. Story time is over.
Oh man!
You presented it in a different way, and
in a very kind way. Anyway, one of my kiddos, I'm still very close with, and this kid he's very intuitive, and he has these great questions about death. And one of the things that I'm working on, doing research on, is child development and death, and like what are their various views as they age. And I'm hoping to put together a workshop with a friend who worked at a grief center in town, the Dougie Center, of how parents can talk to their kids about death. And it doesn't have to be death of yourself or death of grandma or whatever. It can be like, hey, the leaves are falling. That's a death, right? Or like, you know, I don't know, spider ate that fly. That's a little death. But kind of just normalizing that term. And for him, for as long as I've known this child, he'll say these things now to me, like, you know, I'm babysitting him for a night or whatever. And he's like, hey, Angela, you know, I just ate my grilled cheese. That's a death. And I'm like, yeah. And it's bringing you life, right? Because it's making your body strong. Like, anyway, Risa, what I'm saying is I hear you, and I understand, and I don't know what it's like because I don't have kids, but I appreciate you even being here for this conversation, knowing that it is a scary thing to step towards. So like, kudos to you, dude. Mm-hmm. And like, know that there's resources out there to help you in whatever way you would need if you needed it. I'm not saying you do, but.
I mean, I've told this story on the podcast before, so I won't tell it long, but she nearly died twice last summer, once when I wasn't there and once when I was, from anaphylactic shock. And so I'm just like,
sure, it
just changed my brain. So, and yeah, I think about it a lot at this time because it's getting so dark, you know, and it's dark in the world. And Amy and I now have this ritual called the Missing Witches podcast where we talk about death at this time of year every year. Yeah. Well, I was laughing when you were talking about sort of letting kids talk about death in a more casual way, because today May Marigold walked around a pile of sticks that we have in a yard going, that one's dead, and that one's dead, dead.
Yeah. Sounds about right. Kids, they're great.
But it is like you were saying, Angela, like the leaves falling from the tree, like that's a death, but we also see it as like the leaves letting go of that which does no longer serves them, you know, and we can kind of think of our own selves that way, letting go, because you know, our soul, if we want to call it that, is like, is it separate from our bodies? Is it, is the body the trunk and the soul is the leaves, or is it the other way around? You know, what are we releasing? What are we letting go of? You know, I did an episode about Magine Gonzalez Whippler, who wrote a book called What Happens When We Die, and I had a very like Loretta kind of experience where, you know, I read this one section where she talks about the laws of thermodynamics and how the universe is a closed system and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. You know, it was like a science full of scientific principles. So I have all these answers, and yet here we are still talking about this as a great unknown, even though it's in our faces all the time, and some of us have experienced it right in front of our eyes and seen it happen, but it still is like this abstract concept. No?
I feel like to kind of, I mean, I'm always going to bring politics into everything because that's just how my witch mind works.
Good.
But I think that I firmly believe that if your witchcraft doesn't involve some sort of political activism, your witchcraft is bullshit. But that,
we're all nodding again, furious nodding for those of you listening. The pack of furious nodders. Yes, go ahead, Loretta.
As we in the States head into this this upcoming election, and especially around these sacred days and 10 nights of Samhain and Day of the Dead and all of these ceremonies that we are going to be doing to honor the ancestors, you know, whether it's our blood ancestors of the traditions that we work in, or extended family that are now ancestors. I think that it's important to keep in mind that if we want to continue to love the mighty dead the way that we can now, And if we want to continue to be able to actually think about what a good death looks like, and if we want to be able to ensure that our queer friends and family and our Indigenous friends and family and our Black friends and family are able to have a good death and are able to continue to participate in ancestral veneration, it's important to remember that we have some choices to make coming up that will, without question, affect whether or not we can continue to experience or to hopefully push the concept of a good death, and hopefully continue to practice our sacred traditions around the mighty dead the way that we do now. We have some real work to do, and we have some real choices to make, that as we participate in these really, really sacred days and nights, that's at stake.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that balance between the mundane work and the spirit work. When you talk about that activism is a requirement for witchcraft, that's fucking doing the mundane work. You have to do that work for the other ritual to work. So if you're doing rituals for bounty and prosperity and peace, you have to be doing the activist work too, because that's the mundane work that we put in to earn that great wave that comes back. So American witches who are listeners of Missing Witches are voters, but we have to do all the stages of work and amplify what Loretta said.
The same way that we talk about death, we also have to talk about politics, which is like, we cannot be desensitized. We have to keep ourselves aware and sensitive and active. We can't be lulled into a false sense of security, or an even falser sense of ignorance, or an even falser still sense of powerlessness. Yeah. I mean, we're witches. We fucking vote. Because we know how to grab power out of a piece of paper or a stick of wood, right? That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that is it's no secret for anyone who knows me that I've had boots on the ground, in the streets for months now. And that is a fucking ritual. We are out there breathing life into these words, right? We are out there with our feet to the earth. We are out there shedding blood and tears, and that is a ritual. For those of us who still have the privilege to vote, who haven't had that privilege stripped from us, writing your petition and praying over it, working it, whatever you call it, that is a fucking ritual. Those of us who still have the privilege to vote, those of us who still have the privilege to be active in our communities, whether it is, and I acknowledge that being on the street isn't for everyone, and that's okay. And I acknowledge that this country has created systems to prevent people from having access to vote. If you have had that privilege stripped from you, there are still ways to be active in your community. Mm-hmm. There are still ways to receive and be of service in your community. And that is ritual that is so needed and so important. And so it's really, it has to be done right now. And there's work to do that feels small, and there's work to do that, nothing is small anymore.
So true. I feel I am not a person who will be out in the streets. For me, that gives me great anxiety. And at first, you know, I felt I was putting like a guilt trip. I was like, I should be out there. I should. And I was like, no, fuck that. Like, what can I do from my home? So I've been writing postcards as a way to, you know, I've been writing to a bunch of people. I forget at the moment everybody. But anyway, that felt like one thing that I can do from my house that is a spell, right? Spelling, spell, writing, all that stuff. It's something that I can consistently do. And the other thing that's popping up in my mind right now is, so, you know, for example, in death doula training, they're like, talk to your family about what they want for their deaths too. And like, I come from like a South Philadelphian Italian family, and like, no fucking way, like, is my dad going to open up to me about like what he wants for his death, right? And that sucks. But it is what it is. He told me, I took care of it, and I said, okay, like, that means everything's in order for him. And, you know, take that, the death doula lens or the death lens off of it and put a political lens. And like, as scary as it might be to be talking to some family members about their beliefs, like, that is another way to exercise your voice and your power and your, you know, your beliefs to them. So for example, the uncle that doesn't claim to be a racist, but that says some really shitty things, or says some things that are like clearly red flags, or, you know, not even racism, like racist comments. Mm-hmm. Like, having to step up and have that uncomfortable conversation is of the utmost importance right now. And doing it from a place of like love. Like, I love this person. I love you. You are my family. You have known me since I was a baby. Why are you making these choices? You are legit harming people. You know, like, and I think sometimes, I don't want to generalize and say our whole country, but like, people are afraid to speak their truths at times when they know it's going to cause a rift. Whether it's talking about, you know, Dad, you're older than me and you're going to, you know, essentially maybe die before me. Let's talk about your death. Like, what do you want? Or if it's, you know, politics, or if it's, you know, anyway.
Well, a girlfriend of mine was kind of like laughing at me because, you know, again, my father lived with me for many years, but he was an old Eastern European man. He was not like woke or, you know, anything like, so like some of his vocabulary was not just questionable, you know, but he was also an old man with dementia. Mm. So one of my girlfriends was like, why do you bother? You know, he said something offensive. He, you know, called somebody on TV a bad word, whatever. And I was like, because this is my house. And I can't control what goes on out there, but I make the rules here. And I don't care if you're an old man. I don't care if I'm ruining Christmas dinner. I'm happy to ruin Christmas dinner because this is the one place in the entire fucking world where I make the rules. So I don't care if he's going to forget this conversation in 10 minutes or 5 seconds or whatever. Like, I'm going to say it because I need to establish like what is acceptable in my home and what is not. And I think that you can have that same idea for your, like, I'm using my arms to like create a circle around myself. But your own environment. It's like, what is acceptable in my environment and what is not. And you have every right to speak up when something is not acceptable to your environment.
And it's scary, right? Like, for me, like, you know, going up against like my uncle who's like this big man, you know, whatever. It's not easy because I was taught to not speak up. You know, ever. And it feels so good to finally know that I can. But do it anyway. I mean, you know, it's important, obviously. And like, there is a death that's happening, yes, in our world in so many ways. And like, all of it, like this, there is no new normal. Like, it's just going to be reborn in some way that we don't know what it looks like yet. I mean, but we're all, you know, 4 of us are doing the good work, and there's more of us doing good work. So keep doing the good work.
I have one more question that I really want to get to before we wrap this up. And I know it's getting late and it's getting dark out and it's getting darker earlier. But I'm just going to say the word and then maybe you can tell me your thoughts, because like, I'm a witch and I feel myself to be like connected to nature and to something else that I don't know what it is, and I'm totally cool with the unknown and all that. And my husband, I would not describe him this way. He's like, probably he would say he's an atheist. He's you know, he's a very progressive person, but he wouldn't consider himself spiritual in like any way. But he has had like paranormal experiences. He has encountered ghosts. We were in a place where I guess like embalmings had happened at some time in the past, and he felt like blankets being pulled down from him. He's like, he could tell me ghost stories. I've never experienced anything like this in my life. And I think it's funny because he's like the regular dude and I'm the witch, but he sees the ghosts and I ain't never seen no ghost. And I ain't afraid of no ghost, like the Ghostbusters. But like, what do you guys think? Like ghosts. I'm just going to say the word ghosts and you tell me what comes up in your mind. Ghosts.
Yes.
Yes. Angela votes yes. Can I see a show of hands for ghosts? And again, like, I've never been to Italy, but I don't disagree that Italy exists. I'm not saying that just because I've never seen a ghost doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, you know? And I trust my husband, and he's not like some liar, you know, who would just like make up a story for no reason. And he's not that good of an actor either. So, you know, so like, you vote yes. Have any of you ever seen a ghost or like?
Can I share a story?
Yeah, ghost stories. It's October 31st.
I have
a ghost story.
2 ghost stories. Okay. Well, there's a few, but here's the one that comes to mind. I remember being a little kid, and I remember sleeping in my bed, and I don't know if this was just me hallucinating as a child or something, but I remember waking up and looking across my room, and a man dressed in colonial clothing was like shaking his butt at me.
Sorry.
I don't know. No, it's hilarious.
It's a good ghost.
He kind of looked like Ben Franklin. Like in my little like kid brain, I was like, Ben Franklin shaking his butt at me? What the fuck? You know, I was like 7 or 8 probably. Anyway, so yes, I believe in ghosts. The second ghost story actually has to do with the podcast episode with White Feather.
Mm-hmm. White Feather Hunter, yeah.
Yes. She mentioned on the podcast having there was a friend of hers who had died at some point, and she knew of their death before knowing by a ghost called a fetch, a spirit called a fetch came to her, like blink of an eye. She saw it, you know, at the end of a hallway or something. She knew that a friend had passed, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I remember, yeah.
Last, the 30th of October, I was sleeping in my bed. And for the past few months previous to this, I had been woken up a lot by like the feeling of something leaning over me, which I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but it's very unnerving, and it wakes me up with a start. And sometimes I'll throw things like my pillow or the lamp. Anyway, I've gotten that under control because I now protect my space before I go to sleep. But I was sleeping, and this woman with a skeleton face and a beautiful cloak was at the foot of my bed. And I woke up with a start, and I see her, and then, you know, in an instant, she's gone. And I took that to be a fetch because my Aunt Teresa died 2 days later. So yes, call them ghosts, call them spirits, call them what you will. I think, of course they exist. How could they not? You know?
How about you, Loretta? I know you spoke to your father, but like, do you have any more like, you know, stereotypical paranormal experiences?
So admittedly, most of the spirits I see, I can very easily recognize as spirit. I'll tell you about 2 different situations. But probably about almost 20 years ago now, a friend of mine was murdered. And the night that we were informed, his child and his girlfriend spent the night at my house. There's just a group of friends that, you know, everybody got together and they all just stayed at my house. That night, I had fallen asleep and I woke up feeling this like huge pressure on my back. And I couldn't sit up, but I could turn my head. I could clearly, clear as day, see the outline of a man. And audibly, not in my mind, but like audibly in my ear.
And you can tell the difference when you, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very clear difference. He told me, everything's fine. Y'all need to stop with this bullshit. And I was like, okay. And then it was gone and I could move again. So that was a very clear, and obviously someone I knew. Another experience I had with someone I didn't know, my soon-to-be husband, was at my house when we were just friends. And I was doing laundry and I was like forcing him to help me carry baskets downstairs. And there was a room that I had in my old house that I always kept the door closed. It was in the basement. And I had an old rocking chair. I've always loved antiques. I had an old rocking chair in that room, and my fiance was being nosy. He was like, "What's in this room?" And he opened the door, and it wasn't the kind of door that would just like open and close. Like, he opened it and it stayed stuck. That's how it was designed. And he said, "Oh my God." And he ran up the stairs, leaving me there. Looked. And that antique rocking chair was rocking back and forth.
Yeah, I would have noped the fuck out too. I'm on his side. No.
I was pretty used to it. I mean, that house was very old, and like I said, that chair is over 100. I still have that chair, but I looked, still rocking. I was like, man, you really scared him, and I just closed the door and but he would not leave the house for the rest of the time I owned it.
Oh, he noped out for real. He's like, I'm not staying here
forever.
Wow. He does not do spooky stuff. I took him to our first like haunted attraction for the first time this year.
Oh wow! Is this like an opposites attract kind of marriage?
Could not be more different. We do work next to each other. He works at All Sacred, and I work Ritual Craft. But other than that, we are complete and total opposites.
That's how my husband and I are. In fact, I just started agreeing to watch scary movies like this past year, let's say. And the rule is we can only watch them when it's light out.
Oh yeah.
So I have time.
I don't do scary.
Right? For me, in my head, like, I have time to process the rest of the day. By the time I go to sleep, I won't have too many images in my mind. So
I'm going to ruin that for you right now, because you know that monsters like when you have the lights on, because that casts more shadows. More shadows for them to hide in. So yeah, I don't think the light is going to work. Yeah, no problem. When I was a little kid, my sister tortured me my entire life. You just made me think of this. We watched Friday the 13th. Yes, she's older. Mm-hmm. We watched Friday the 13th, and there's this scene where someone is in a hammock and you just see like the knife blade come up through their throat. And I was traumatized, completely traumatized, way too young, however young I was to have seen this. And so I sort of like logicked my way out of it, as, you know, we feral children do. We have to kind of figure it out for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I decided, like, okay, that was a hammock. I have a box spring. I have a mattress, like, you know, his blade, like. And so I told my theory of safety to my sister, who responded, "Do you know how strong Jason is? He could easily shove that." And I took the legs off my bed, and I slept with a box spring and a mattress on the floor for years after that. But I still like being scared. Loretta, how does Santa Muerte help you to not be scared?
Well, she, when my sister first was killed, I was saying I learned how to call in a specific shadow to hide myself from reporters and just people staring. When I finally went back to school, everybody would just kind of stare at me. It was always kind of a weird kid, but after Anita was killed, I was considered a really weird kid. So that was my first experience with what I figured out later on when I first saw an image of her, that was her, that I was able to call in. So she, as far as like her indigenous roots go, I think that there's nothing that's more powerful than her indigenous roots for me in this lifetime. So knowing that she walks with me and seeing her literally, I've definitely seen her. I have pictures of her when she's appeared. I know that I don't walk alone. Not only with her on the left, but my ancestors on the right and my ancestors behind me. So she is a very present presence. And she's, I, in my experience and with lots of people I talk to who are also devotees, she makes herself known.
Mm-hmm. That really ties into what you were saying, Angela, too, just about like recognizing that you're not alone and that you are surrounded by, if we believe that something continues after death, and again, as like a science-minded person who believes in the laws of thermodynamics, I do believe that something continues after we die. So if you believe that, then just knowing that presence exists around you, whether it's Santa Muerte or your grandmother or something else maybe that you've even invented as a presence, if you don't have someone, if you don't have a deity that really resonates with you, or if you don't have a family member that you really felt connected to, like, we can just like sort of think of this like this great energy of like welcoming and care.
I think it's important too, like if you are a person who has high anxiety or depression, and you have felt that like being more permeable, like letting your awareness of ancestors or spirit, letting that come close to you would make you feel unsafe, that would increase your anxiety, that if you started to let yourself see, then you wouldn't be able to stop. Like if you are a person who's a sensitive or empathic person, you have that fear. Maybe I'm speaking about myself. It was powerful to me to be told, like, you are always in this realm, in your house, able to say, I'm only welcoming spirit here that has my highest interest at heart.
Yeah.
This realm is ours. We can say, no, I'm not. Nothing can come here right now. You just can't be here right now. That was really like, okay, I can draw this line, and if I never want to acknowledge it or let it close to me, I don't have to. I can have spirit around me. I can have know that my grandparents are with me, my ancestors are with me, but that can be a choice. And I think, anyway, that was empowering for me to know. So maybe for a listener, that's something protective.
I think for people who have that anxiety or that fear, the biggest thing to remember is that you have the advantage of having both a physical body right now and a spiritual body, where spirit has a spirit body. Mm-hmm. So you walk in several worlds right now. So you really do have the advantage, because you walk in several worlds, but also, it's like, you don't allow people, you wouldn't open your door and just leave it open and let any person walk in and out.
Right.
So you have the ability to say, in this space, in my presence, in this vicinity, there's no door open, and the door will not be open until I put the key through the keyhole, turn the key, and open the door. period. And you can speak that whenever you need to because your words are so powerful.
I feel compelled to add here that this works equally as well for your racist uncle as it does for ghosts and spirits.
Totally.
Like we were talking about before, you can close that door and that is okay.
Just close that door.
Yeah, this is not welcome. This is not welcome around here.
Yeah.
So, Angela, how can people pay you for your services?
They can contact me in two ways. PDX Death Doula is my Instagram handle for most of my death doula work, but I also have Heartwise Woman, which is also, that's my more personal page, but it's kind of morphing together right now. So Instagram,
the personal is political.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Instagram's a great way to get a hold of me. And yeah, I do the virtual living funeral ceremonies. I want to start doing, we haven't even, this is like totally random, but I also am an intuitive eater and anti-dieter. And I want to do like death work around that. And like dieting is basically fear of death. But anyway, so I'm going to start offering more death doula work, but specifically towards breaking up with diet culture.
I think we could do a whole series about food magic, and that would be like one episode in that series.
Yeah.
And like, it's fucking wild. I mean, I won't start because I will go on forever. But that's me combining death doula work and then other work that's powerful. And I feel passionately about both. So I want to combine them in some beautiful way. Anyway, Instagram, hit me up. I love you.
So it's PDX, the letters PDX, and then doula is DOULA.
Yes.
Great. Loretta, how can people pay you? They can visit your shop. Tell us about like Mile High Conjure, all of that.
So people can always, if you're local or not local, you can come into the shop to Ritual Craft, and I am very often in the front. And I'm always honored to serve the community in that way.
This is Denver, Colorado, for those of you who are listening.
Wheat Ridge, but it's all the same.
Can you say it again? Can you say what's the actual?
It's technically in Wheat Ridge.
Wheat Ridge?
Yeah.
Because I want people to be able to specifically find you, so I don't want to send anybody on a goose chase wandering around the streets of Denver. So that's Ritual Craft is the name of your shop?
Ritual Craft, and it's not my shop, but I run the front end. Yeah, we're all there, happy to serve the community. I'm there more often than not. You can also find me on my personal Instagram page, The Death Witch. You can find some of the most magical and important people in my magical family at Mile High Conjure Gala. It's an event that I do every year. This year it'll be online, where I attempt to elevate the work of my teachers and elders.
And we've met, for those of you, our listeners who have seen the clips of the witch documentary, a lot of their content came from you specifically, and you sort of holding Melissa's hand and guiding her through your work. So shout out on behalf of Melissa, and shout out Witch Documentary. They sent us their new trailer recently, and I posted about it. It's like my new favorite movie. I've seen 2 minutes of it and I'm like, come on guys, put this movie out. I need to see the full length. Come on, this is not enough for me. So hopefully, yeah, there's like Beverly Smith and Charles Porterfield, whom you mentioned. Like it really, yeah. And Melissa was specifically mentioned you as being like someone who was so integral to that process. So on her behalf, thank you for just being a community leader.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So,
and to honor my teachers and elders. Without them, I would be a mere mortal.
So any immortal words to close out this October 31st for our listeners? I'll leave it to you. Immortal words, messages from the beyond that I can't get because I smoke too much weed. Somebody told me that once. Somebody told me that I don't connect with spirit because I smoke too much weed, and I was like, maybe it's for the best. Maybe I would have too much action if I didn't keep it suppressed with my chronic weed smoking. So anyway, final October 31st words for our listeners.
Get quiet. And if spirit wakes you at 2 a.m, light a candle and sit.
I think everything has a spirit. Nothing is mundane. The spirit of this coming year is going to be one of the most important spirits that we feed.
Mm-hmm.
So let's all think about what a good death means for ourselves and our family members, and also for all the people in our society who are playing by different rules than we are, who are living in spaces that they did not design, and how we could possibly get to a place where everybody gets the good death that they deserve. Yeah, and we wish a good death for all of you. It sounds horrible to say, but hey, a good death to you all. Not today, though. Not today, witches. Not today.
Maybe people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Angela, Loretta.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh.
This is, I mean, we could go on for 3 more hours, and I think maybe we should just do this as like at very least a yearly. This is like our set Samhain from now on is Angela and Loretta, because we didn't even scratch the
barely
surface.
scratched the surface.
And both of you are such amazing, like vital people, and that's what's so amazing to me is like that you're both like, you know, a lot of your focus is on death, but it doesn't take any of your vitality. Like both of you are so like oozing life, and that's what's so beautiful about both of you and about your praxis.
That's the thing about death work, is that it will bring you more presence and more life than you could ever imagine, in my opinion.
Happy Halloween, witches. We love you so much. Have a good death.
You must be a witch.
Don't forget to go to foxglovefarm.com and use offer code MissingWitches.